On this, the last day of the 1992 convention of the California Association of School Psychologists, it seems fairly evident to all of us that this conference will be one of the more successful in our history. So allow me to extend a special welcome to all of the parents who are joining us today. Sincerely hope that this day and the workshops will prove to be a valuable and worthwhile experience for you, and that this parent workshop day will become a regular part of CASP's annual convention. At this time, I'd like to turn the meeting over to co-chairperson. Let me introduce Mancy Yu, who will introduce our speaker.
Good morning on this final day of our convention. I was first introduced to this morning's speaker by way of her book, Elegant Choices, Healing Choices, a wonderful book about achieving wholeness as a human being through making conscious and aware choices in everything we do. She described quite early on in her book's introduction of her experience with teaching first grade inner city ghetto children. She brought lots of fresh, beautiful flowers into her classroom just to watch the children's reactions to these, quote, lovely gifts of nature, unquote. She observed that her young students behaved better. They blossomed and seemed to be transformed in some way. When I read this, I thought, this person is one very special individual. And I pretty much devoured the rest of the book. I suspected that while her students did indeed respond to the beautiful flowers, they also responded to their teacher's own inner calmness, beauty, and love of children. I am speaking about our presenter this morning, Dr. Marcia Sinatar, author, educator, corporate psychologist, and one of America's foremost exponents on the practical value of self-actualization. She began her professional career as a teacher, moving through the ranks of public education as a principal, curriculum specialist, and university lecturer. Her several published works are currently being used worldwide in a growing number of diverse professional settings: universities, therapy, recovery, and career counseling sessions. CASP is very honored to have Dr. Marcia Sinatar as our speaker this morning. Please join me in welcoming her.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Yu, Mancy, for that beautiful introduction. And I want to acknowledge the CASP board for the really outstanding coordination and, coordination and facility here. I do a lot of speaking around the country, and really this was one of the best organized talks or sessions that I've been at. Including the little bag that I just received, and it's just all the materials and handouts. It's just a luxury to come into a setting that is so professionally organized. And I'm profoundly grateful at having been thought of for today's speech. Now, before I get started, I thought I would mention that I'll talk with you for about 45 minutes, and then I'd like to have some question and answer time. It is possible to have a dialogue even with people sitting way in the back, and the fact that we don't know each other very well. But as you know, sometimes even with a stranger, we're sitting on a bus stop or shopping or waiting for an airplane. It is entirely possible to have a good two-way conversation in a very short bit of time. And the most fulfilling part of the time when I come out to speak is the time when I can get to know each of you. I thought I would tell you about my background as an educator, but that's been done for me. I will tell you that I'm from Northern California. I relocated up here about 10 years ago, left public education, My original goal as an educator was to be a superintendent of schools, public instruction. And about the time when I had become a curriculum consultant, I realized that I would have to wait a long, long time to, how shall I put this, to be worthy of the position. I am a slight bit, left of center. I don't mean politically left, I'm just a little bit off. Hopefully not too much off, but a little bit. And it was very tough to modify myself into the mainstream. There is life after public sector work, for all of you who are thinking along those lines. I would say I have a more artistic, contemplative, reflective temperament than a political, extroverted one. And you'll see for yourself this morning as I go along, because as I come in to speak about this topic of authentic soaring, I have in my mind what that means, and perhaps I'm missing the boat as far as your interests are concerned. First of all, I wanted to spend a little bit of time defining what I see as authentic soaring. Secondly, I wanted to suggest to you, and you're going to hear me say throughout my talk as I thread my way through these topics, that this idea of soaring is a universal wish. And we can see this wish in all of the cultures of humankind, in the literature and sacred stories of our heritage, whatever our heritage happens to be. And when this wish is thwarted, as it is in so many cases today, we subvert our wish to soar by chemical means or promiscuity or dangerous means. In other words, there's this longing to fly. And if we can't fly through our mind, our imagination, our talents, our values, our growth, and these are all ways that we can, something happens and we begin to look for counterfeit means. And finally, I wanted to suggest today that if we can have a dialogue, which the Q&A might provide, I think it would help us flesh out some of this, because there's an awful lot to talk about. It's very difficult in 45 minutes to present everything. I'm reminded of a talk that I did back east where it was a group such as this, perhaps a touch larger, and college students and their parents had come, and professors. And I had gotten to the end of the talk and a wonderful Q&A, and then at the very end, one young man, he must have been 16 or so, raised his hand and he said, well, he says, I don't want to ask you a very complicated question, but he says, in just 25 words or less, he says, so what do you think the meaning of life is? Well, that's sort of what I feel when I'm asked to talk in 45 minutes on this subject of authentic soaring. Well, one can barely cover the ground, but at least I could perhaps open up a window of optimism, a window of contemplation for you, something to think about down the line, next week, next year, or for the next 10 or 15 years. Maybe you're like me. If I hear a good idea, I do chew on it for a decade or so before it becomes mine. And so I'd like to suggest 5 keys to unlock this subject that we're calling authentic soaring. And while I know we're here to think about ways to touch children, I'm going to talk in a genderless, ageless, vocationless way. And if it's valid, it's going to be valid for all of us. Now, soaring, first of all, what is it? Before I get into these keys, I see it as either and or the bid for a heroic life and or situational bursts of creativity and what I would call release, creative release, self-transcendence. Now, let me lead into my first key. The first key to this soaring is to understand that we have a universal wish to soar, as I suggested in my opening little introduction. And this universal requires two things. It requires a tough self-love, and it requires also that we grapple with the realities of life. There is a way of soaring where we are grappling with what we might call the unrealities of life. And this is not what I mean by soaring. That's one of those counterfeit means. But tough self-love is required for soaring because as we hear from people who have creative gifts, artistic gifts, gifted scientists, gifted entrepreneurs, and people who are teaching or working with students in such a way, or parents working with kids in such a way that they touch some humanity in the other. There's always a piece of authenticity where the individual who's being touched says within themselves, ah, yes, this is true for me. This experience is so for me. And at the very point of this contact between ourself and what is true is the release, is the opening up, this door to freedom. Soaring could be described and has been described by many others. And I'm using the word soaring. It could be called as Rollo May, when he talks about the courage to create, he is talking about soaring. And he says that this courage to create lets us move ahead despite fear or difficulty or despair. And so that's one of those little bursts of release that I was talking about. You know, where you've struggled with a problem for years maybe, and then just as you're ready to give up, some little mind shift happens and you have the courage to move out into the unknown. And you find yourself, even with or without a plan, doing it so that it works. Soaring is also what I think the theologian Paul Tillich, talks about the good life. And he says that the good life for all of us human beings is when life surpasses itself. I think this is such a beautiful thought, that life has a yearning to surpass itself. And this too is soaring. And that's what I mean by it can be a bid to live a heroic life, have a heroic career, be a heroic human being, or it could be situational where, you know, we surpass our former limits in a particular given situation of our life where some obstacle has been in our way. The Hindu philosophers talk about moksha. Moksha is liberation, where the human being, for a brief instant, moves out of his or her skin, you know what I mean? Abraham Maslow, Professor Maslow, talked about self-transcendence, the ecstatic experience. I very rarely go to physicians. When I have a little ailment, I go to acupuncture, or I have a homeopathist. I have all these little, I told you I was a little left of center. And my homeopathist is a young, very gifted young man who, he and his wife recently had a new baby. And he was telling me that the first time he looked into his baby's eyes, he felt that he was one not only with that child, but all of humanity. This is soaring. This is that one little burst where we are moving beyond ourselves. And this is a universal wish, as I say. And we can see it and hear it in others if you have eyes to see and ears to hear. I was overhearing a bird watcher, and she said about bird watching. She says, I just love to watch birds fly. She says, makes me feel so free, and I wish I could fly. And a woman overhearing her said, yes, I know what you mean. She says, I've heard that some people dream of flying. And she says, I've never had a dream like that, but I wish I could. I just love to lift up off the ground and fly. Let me just Just by a show of hands, if you'd be so brave. Nobody's going to look at you. How many of you have had a dream where you've flown? Have any of you had flying? Oh, wonderful. Me too. I love those dreams. I don't know what they mean. Freud, if he was here, he would probably say it's some sort of phallic jealousy or something. But I don't know. To me, it's just this wish to be more and experience life and say yes to life. It's like that. So if we look at these universal wishes, we can see even in our culture, no matter what culture, look at children. They whirl around the playground, whirl and whirl and whirl. Why? And then they fall down on the grass or look up at the sky and everything's moving around, and for a minute they're free. And they can lift out of their bodies, so to speak. We have skydiving and scuba diving and all these experiences that take us out of ourselves. They demand total focus. We love these, even though there's some danger. Why? Because for a minute we're exhilarated and we're free. Watching planes, I think it's so telling, sort of prophetic. My room overlooks the runway, and I was making some final notes for this talk, and I was looking and thinking about watching birds, and all of a sudden in comes this 747 jet, and I was thinking, you know, I remember living in Southern California near the airport, and people actually used to go out in their cars, parents and kids, and they would get out of the cars and they would sort of lay on the hood of the car. I always thought this was so strange. And they would have a bag lunch, and they'd be eating food and watching these planes overhead. I think this is also a wish to soar. Immersing ourselves, losing ourselves in literature, good mystery, a good novel. This is in music, in prayer, meditation. You name it. Since the beginning of time, human beings have looked beyond themselves, beyond their daily, minute, petty self-interest into the great, grand, sublime beyond.
Well, this is Marcia Sinitar thanking you for listening. This is part one of what might be a two-part keynote talk. It's self-explanatory. I wanted to make a couple of points. First of all, for those of you that enjoy this type of talk, it's a little long, but I wonder if you would subscribe. Hit the like button if you like it. I'm going to try and expand this type of teaching archive, especially for those of you that work with other people who are engaged in either psychology or teaching, one of the helping professionals, clergy of course, with an angle towards the spiritual side of growth, learning, teaching, helping others. So that's the first thing. The second thing, I wasn't too sure about this word moksha, which is Sanskrit. So for those of you that are more familiar with it, I know it means liberation from the cycle of life. In other words, a kind of liberation from what we might call karma. Or at least that's what I think it means. But if you have a better idea, if it's more accurate than what we can find on Google, let's say, if you could put a short comment in the comment section. So please, if you enjoy what we're doing and want to see us expand, please subscribe. Please hit the like button. Thank you so much for listening.